Pauline Cushman. Pauline was known by her birth name Harriet Wood or her last married name. When 18, she moved to New York and became an actress. This is when she toured around. While she was in Kentucky, she became an agent. This is when she was offered money to toast Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy, while in a performance. She completed the act and then reported it to a Union official, which by seeing this act would make it possible for her to spy on the Confederate camps. She was publicly fired from the theater company, and as soon as she was fired, Pauline became a spy working for the Union forces as she followed the Confederate troops. She was also given an honorary commission as a major of cavalry. In Shelbyville, Kentucky, she got caught with documents that gave her away as a spy. She was then taken to Nathan Bedford Forrest, which then became the head of the KKK. They passed her off to General Bragg, which was the senior officer of the Confederate Army. General Bragg did not believe her cover story, so she was tried as a spy and sentenced to hang, though her execution was delayed because of her illness. But she was also rescued when the Confederate forces retreated as the Union Army moved in. After the war, she continued her acting career, which is where she told her stories. Sarah Emma Edmonds, who was also known as Frank Thompson. When she was younger, she was dressed as a little boy. She was known for serving in the war, disguised as a man. She was a nurse and a Civil War soldier. Other names she was known as were Sarah Emma Edmonds, C. Lee, Franklin Thompson, and Bridget O'Shea. When she was a spy, she would be disguised as either a white woman, a white man, a black woman, or a black man. In total, she had 11 trips behind the Confederate lines. Once, while treating a soldier, she discovered that they were also a woman. She then buried them to make sure that no one discovered their identity. Later on, she worked as Sarah Edmonds as a nurse. Elizabeth Van Lew. When she was in the Philadelphia Quaker School, she became an abolitionist. When she returned home and her father died, she convinced her mom to free the family slaves. She spied for the Union, and when she went to the Confederate Libby prison, she took clothing, food, and medicine to the prisoners. She also helped the prisoners escape from the Confederate Libby prison. To cover her activities, she dressed oddly and acted strangely, and she was never arrested for her spying. She was known as a crazy bet. After the war, she used her income from being a spy to live life out of poverty. Mary Elizabeth Bowser. She was born a slave on Richmond, Virginia, on the plantation of John Van Lew, who was a wealthy hardware merchant. Mary had photographic memory, which made it easy for her to memorize all the things she saw when she was a servant. Days before war, she married Wilson Bowser, who was a free black man. She discovered her acts as being a crazy bet. She went regularly to the Libby prison with food, medicine, and helped prisoners escape of all kinds. Then they hid out in a secret room of her mansion. She worked as a servant for Davis, which is where she got the most valuable information. Davis found out that there was a leak in the house, but there was never suspicion on Mary. The last days of the Confederacy, suspicion fell on Mary, but the reason is unknown. She left in January 1865, while her last plan to burn down the Confederate White House was unsuccessful. Mary Edwards Walker. She graduated as a doctor of medicine, qualifying as a medical doctor and a surgeon. Though she was not allowed to work as a physician, she became a nurse and a spy. While treating prisoners, the Confederates found out, and she was in prison for months until she was released as a prisoner exchange. Afterwards, she worked as a writer and lecturer, usually appearing in a man's suit and a top hat. When she was a teacher, she modified her clothing to be loose on the waist, shorter on the skirt, with pants underneath. Sarah Rosetta Wakeman. Rosetta was unspoken and independent, and hoped that one day she could buy a farm of her own after the war. When younger, Rosetta worked on her father's dairy farm to help support the family. Her father served as a town constable, but was still deeply in debt. Later on, Rosetta worked as a domestic, which is where she was a housekeeper for a family. At 19, when she moved to Binghamton, New York, she discovered that she could earn more money disguised as a man. She distinguished herself as a man in order to participate in the Civil War. Rosetta was then hired as a boatman on a coal barge. She sent most of her earnings back to her family. She also sent letters to her family, which were hidden from the public and put into an attic. Most of her letters explained her strong religious faith, the pride she felt as being a good soldier, and her strong desire to be financially independent. During this time, getting water was a hard source, which is where Rosetta and her fellow soldiers drank from streams, which were poisoned by rotting flesh of dead animals. At the time, no one was aware of this, even though the soldiers were getting ill symptoms. Rosetta felt sick to the point that she had to be admitted to the regimental hospital in Alexandria, Louisiana. She was then transferred to a federal hospital in New Orleans where her condition got worse. She later died at the hospital on June 19, 1864, which is where the nurses found her true gender, though they did not report it, and buried her as a soldier named Lyons Wakeman. Many years later, a relative found Rosetta's letters, which is where they were published. As you can see, throughout the Civil War, women helped in ways as staying home, taking care of the house, being nurses, and being spies, helping out to find out plans, and also participating in the war.